She hasn't worked a real job in 3 years, Your Honor. She's been living off handouts and making excuses. My brother didn't even look at me when he said it. He adjusted his cufflinks. He actually stopped to adjust his cufflinks in the middle of a probate hearing, like he was posing for a magazine cover instead of trying to steal my grandmother's estate. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away from the wall behind the judge's head. I just breathed. Have you ever sat in a room full of people who all agreed, before you even opened your mouth, that you were the problem? Drop a yes in the comments if you know what that silence feels like. I want to know how many of us have been there. The conference room in the attorney's office smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee. There were 8 of us crammed around a dark mahogany table that was trying very hard to look more expensive than it was. My brother Oliver sat to the left, flanked by his wife and his personal attorney, a man named Patrick who kept clicking his pen like it was a nervous habit he'd given up trying to fix. My aunt and 2 cousins sat along the wall behind them. They weren't required to be there. Oliver had invited them. He needed an audience. I sat on the right side of the table with my own attorney, just the 2 of us. The mediator, a retired judge named Howard, looked at me over his reading glasses. "Ms. Vance," he said, "your brother has raised some significant concerns about your role in managing the estate since your grandmother's passing. Do you have anything you'd like to say in response?" Oliver leaned forward before I could answer. "She had full access to the account for 4 months, he said. 4 months, and she never filed a single report. She didn't return calls. She missed the tax appointment. And now she wants half?" He gestured at me the way you'd gesture at a car with a dented bumper. Like I was a problem to be assessed, not a person to be spoken to. I looked at him then. Really looked. He'd gotten a haircut since the funeral. New suit. He looked like a man who had been preparing for this meeting for longer than our grandmother had been in the ground. "Let him finish," I said quietly, to my attorney, not to Oliver. My attorney, a woman named Sandra who had the energy of someone who had seen every version of this exact conversation and was mildly bored by all of them, gave me a small nod. Oliver took that as encouragement. He went on for 11 more minutes. I know because I timed it. He talked about my apartment in Portland, the one I shared with a roommate until 8 months ago. He called it unstable. He mentioned that I drove a 2014 Honda Civic that needed new tires. He brought up the fact that I had taken a sabbatical from my job at a nonprofit to care for our grandmother during her final year, framing it as unemployment because that was more useful to him. He told Howard that I had always been the difficult one, that our grandmother had said so herself, and that her mental state in her final months had made her vulnerable to manipulation. That last one was the one that was supposed to break me. I thought about Grandma June then. She'd had all her faculties right up until the last 3 weeks. She used to read the financial section of the newspaper every morning with her coffee. She kept a legal pad next to her chair with notes about her investments. She called me her sharp one and meant it as the highest compliment she knew how to give. She had not been manipulated. She had been deliberate. Oliver didn't know that the sabbatical I took wasn't a sacrifice. It was a strategy. 12 months earlier, I had been sitting in that same house at Grandma June's kitchen table, watching her sort through a stack of documents her estate attorney had sent over. She'd asked me to help her understand a particular clause about the distribution of her brokerage account. I was 29. I had spent 4 years working in nonprofit financial compliance. I understood what I was reading. What I read made me set down my coffee very carefully. There was a codicil, a modification to the original will, dated 14 months prior. It redirected 60% of the liquid assets, including the brokerage account, to a new family trust. Oliver was named sole trustee. Grandma June had not written that codicil. I knew her handwriting, I knew her phrasing, and I knew that 14 months ago she had been recovering from hip surgery and had not left the house without assistance. I didn't say anything to her that day. I didn't want to frighten her, and I didn't want Oliver to know I'd seen it. I just folded the document back the way I'd found it, set it on top of the pile, and said, "I think you should keep an eye on that one, Grandma, just to make sure everything looks the way you intended." She looked at me for a long moment. Sharp one, she said. Over the next 10 months, I did 3 things. First, I took the sabbatical. I moved into the back bedroom of Grandma June's house in Beaverton and told my family it was because she needed help with her medications and her appointments. That was true. But it also meant I had access to every piece of mail that came to the house, every document that needed signing, and every phone call Oliver made to her about simplifying the estate. Second, I started keeping records, not just notes, documented records. Every phone call logged with time and duration, every document photographed before it was filed, every visitor noted. I bought a small external hard drive that I kept in my suitcase and backed up to an encrypted cloud folder every single night. I wasn't panicking. I was auditing. Third, I called an estate litigation attorney, not to file anything, just to understand what I was looking at and what I would need to prove it. Sandra had told me in that first phone call, if the codicil was forged, you're going to need more than suspicion. You're going to need a paper trail that tells a story a judge can follow without you having to explain every step. So I built one. Grandma June passed in February, quietly at home the way she'd wanted. I held her hand. Oliver sent flowers. The estate went into probate. I was named co-executor in the original will, the one predating the codicil. Oliver's attorney immediately filed a motion to have me removed, citing my lack of professional qualifications and what he called a pattern of financial irresponsibility. The motion included a credit report, which showed a period of missed payments from 4 years ago when I was between jobs. It included a letter, supposedly from a former employer, questioning my reliability. The letter was fake. I had worked at that organization for 3 years and left on excellent terms. I still had every performance review, but I didn't say any of that in response to the motion. I filed a 1-paragraph objection stating that I disputed the claims and would address them at the scheduled mediation. Oliver thought I was stalling because I was scared. Patrick, his pen-clicking attorney, probably told him I'd fold before we even got to the table. They had no idea what I'd spent 10 months building. Back in the conference room, Oliver finished his performance and sat back in his chair with the satisfied look of a man who believed he'd just won something. His wife touched his arm. His cousins murmured. Patrick stopped clicking his pen and made a note on his legal pad. "Ms. Vance," Howard said, "do you have a response?" I said, "I do, but first I want to make sure I understand the claim correctly." I turned to Oliver. "You're saying that I mismanaged the estate account during the 4 months of co-administration, that I failed to report, failed to communicate, and that my general instability makes me unfit to serve as co-executor." "That's correct," Patrick said, jumping in before Oliver could. "And your position," I continued, still looking at my brother, "is that the codicil naming you sole trustee of the brokerage account should be upheld, and that my portion of the estate should be redirected to the family trust under your administration." Oliver smiled. "For the protection of the assets, yes." I nodded slowly. "Okay." I reached into the folder Sandra had placed in front of me at the start of the meeting. I just wanted to make sure we were all in agreement about what this is actually about. I pulled out the first document and placed it in front of Howard. It was a forensic handwriting analysis. Commissioned 6 months ago, performed by a certified examiner with 22 years of experience in document authentication. The analysis compared Grandma June's confirmed signature from 17 notarized documents spanning 2018 to 2022 against the signature on the codicil. The conclusion was 3 words, inconsistent with subject. Howard looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at Oliver. Oliver's smile didn't disappear all at once. It sort of deflated, like something had been let out of it. "That's not," he started. "There's more," I said. I placed the second document in front of Howard. It was a notary record request. In Oregon, notaries are required to maintain journals of every document they notarize. The notary stamp on the codicil belonged to a woman named Beverly who had a small practice in Gresham. I had submitted a public records request for her journal 6 months ago. Beverly's journal had no entry for the date on the codicil, no entry for her grandmother's name, no entry for Oliver's name. The date simply did not exist in her records. Beverly had also submitted a sworn affidavit. which I placed next, confirming that she had notarized any document for our family on that date, that she did not recognize the signature on the stamp as hers, and that she had reported the potential misuse of her credentials to the Oregon State Bar. The room was very quiet. Patrick had stopped moving entirely. He was staring at the affidavit the way you stare at something you don't want to be real. "She's lying," Oliver said. His voice had changed. The boardroom tone was gone. He sounded like a person now, which was somehow worse. "Beverly made an error. She notarizes hundreds of documents. She probably just missed the entry. She keeps digital records cross-referenced with her physical journal," I said. I asked. My aunt made a sound from the wall behind Oliver. I didn't look at her. "This is fabricated," Oliver said, louder now. He turned to Howard. "She had 10 months in that house. She could have altered anything. She could have coached that notary. She's doing exactly what she always does. She's creating chaos and then pointing at it like it's someone else's fault." There it was. The reframe. The thing narcissists do when the evidence closes in, they don't deny the evidence. They question your capacity to have gathered it honestly. I had been waiting for this. Because here's the thing about growing up with someone like my brother. You learn to think 3 moves ahead. Not because you're paranoid, because you have to be. I looked at Howard. In anticipation of this objection, I said, "I've also included a chain of custody log for every document in this folder. Each item has a timestamp, a source, and an independent verification contact. The forensic examiner can be reached directly. Beverly's contact information is on her affidavit letterhead. Nothing in this folder was generated by me or passed through my hands without documentation of where it came from." I slid the chain of custody log across the table. Howard took it without a word. Oliver turned to Patrick. Patrick was looking at his legal pad. He wasn't writing anything. He was just looking at it. "Patrick," Oliver said. Patrick said very quietly, "I need a moment." I let the silence sit. I had learned something over the past year, something I hadn't fully understood before I moved into that back bedroom and started watching my brother operate. Silence is not absence. Silence is pressure. When you stop filling the air, the other person has to. And what they fill it with tells you everything. Oliver filled it with more. He told Howard that our grandmother had changed her wishes in the last year of her life, that the codicil represented her true intentions, even if the paperwork wasn't perfect, that I had taken advantage of her isolation to turn her against him. He talked faster and faster. His wife put her hand on his arm again, and this time he shook it off. I watched him and thought about something Grandma June had said to me, about 4 months before she died. We'd been sitting on the back porch watching the neighbor's dog lose its mind over a squirrel. She'd said, out of nowhere, "Your brother thinks I don't see him clearly. He thinks I'm sentimental." She paused. "I am sentimental, but I'm not blind." She had asked me, that afternoon, to witness 2 documents. I had watched her sign them with a steady hand. I had signed below as witness. The date was in my handwriting in black ink, on documents that had been filed with her estate attorney's office the following morning. The first was a letter of intent addressed to the probate court, reaffirming the terms of her original will and explicitly stating that any subsequent amendments were not made at her direction. The second was a letter to me, personal, not legal. Just Grandma June saying the things she wanted on record somewhere, even if that record was only mine. I hadn't planned to use the first letter at mediation. I had hoped the handwriting analysis and the notary fraud would be sufficient. But Oliver had called her confused. He had called her isolated. He had called her vulnerable. I pulled out the final document. Howard read it without expression. When he finished, he set it down and removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "This is a letter of intent," he said. "Filed with the estate attorney's office 11 months ago," Sandra confirmed. "We have the filing receipt. It directly contradicts the codicil," Howard said. "Yes," I said. Howard looked at Oliver. Oliver was looking at the table. I had one more thing to say, and I wanted to say it directly to my brother, not to Howard or Sandra or anyone else in the room. I wanted him to hear it from me. "I didn't come here to embarrass you," I said. "I came here because she trusted me to." She spent 40 years building something, and she knew exactly what she wanted done with it. I was with her at the end, Oliver. You weren't. I paused. She didn't say anything bad about you. She never did. She just wanted it to go to the right place. He didn't answer. Outside, Patrick requested a recess. I heard him in the hallway, his voice low and urgent, telling Oliver something I couldn't make out. My cousins left without speaking to me. My aunt paused near the door and looked at me for a moment, and I thought she might say something, but she didn't. Sandra and I sat in the conference room with 2 paper cups of bad coffee. He's going to challenge the letter of intent, she said. I know. It'll take another few months. I know. She looked at me. You're not worried. I thought about it. No, I said. I built this so that every piece supports every other piece. He can pull at one thread, but the whole thing holds. She smiled a little. Where did you learn to do that? My grandmother, I said. She was a bookkeeper for 30 years. She used to say the numbers always tell the truth eventually. You just have to be patient enough to let them. Oliver challenged the letter of intent. It took 4 months. In those 4 months, 3 things happened. Patrick withdrew from the case. I don't know exactly why, and I didn't ask. Oliver hired a new attorney, a younger man who seemed to genuinely believe his client's version of events, which told me he hadn't done much due diligence before taking the case. The Oregon State Bar opened a formal investigation into the notary stamp forgery. That investigation, I was told, was moving in a direction that had nothing to do with Beverly and everything to do with the document itself and who had produced it. And a woman came forward, a former paralegal who had worked for the attorney who originally drafted the codicil. She had left the firm 8 months ago. She contacted Sandra's office after seeing a public filing notice. She had a memory of that document. She had a specific memory of being asked to process paperwork for a client meeting that, when she pulled her own personal notes, had never actually taken place. I never asked her to come forward. She did it on her own. Some people, when they see something that isn't right, just can't leave it alone. I understand that. The probate court ruled in my favor on a Wednesday morning in October. The codicil was invalidated. The original will was upheld. The estate was distributed according to Grandma June's actual wishes, which included a meaningful portion to a literacy foundation she'd volunteered with for 12 years, a specific bequest to her neighbor who had brought her soup every Thursday for the last 5 years of her life, and the remainder split equally between me and Oliver. Equally. She didn't cut him out, even knowing what she knew, even having written that letter. She left him his share. I used to think that was her being forgiving. Now I think it was something more precise than that. She was showing him, one last time, what it looked like to be fair. Even when he didn't have to be, Oliver signed the distribution paperwork without contesting it. I don't know if the bar investigation had anything to do with that decision. I didn't ask. I drove home on a Wednesday afternoon with the windows down, the radio on, the kind of October air that feels like it's cleaning something out of your lungs. I stopped at the nursery where Grandma June used to buy her tomato starts every spring, and I bought a small rosemary plant for my kitchen windowsill. She always kept one. She said it smelled like paying attention. I put it on my sill. I watered it. I went to bed early. There is a version of this story where I feel victorious, triumphant, where the ending feels like a movie and I walk out of the courthouse in slow motion with the music swelling. That's not what it felt like. It felt like putting something down that had been very heavy for a very long time. It felt like breathing out. It felt like keeping a promise to someone who had already kept every promise she ever made to me. My grandmother spent her whole life being the kind of person who told the truth in small ways every day because she believed the small ways added up to something. She kept accurate records. She paid her debts. She sent birthday cards on time. She called you back. She raised me on the idea that integrity is just what you do when no one's watching. The difference is, she didn't account for a granddaughter who was watching everything. I kept every file. I still have that hard drive. I'm not sure I'll ever delete it. Some people would tell you to let it go, to move on, to not let someone else's choices take up space in your life that you could use for something better. I did move on. But I kept the records. Because here's what 10 months in that back bedroom taught me. The truth doesn't protect itself. Someone has to do it. Someone has to write it down, back it up, and stay at the table long enough to say it out loud. She couldn't do it herself at the end, so I did it for her. That's all this was. That's all it ever was. People ask me sometimes if I regret spending 10 months of my life in that back bedroom, tracking documents and backing up files and logging phone calls, instead of living the way a 30-year-old is supposed to live. And I always have to think about it for a second. Not because I'm unsure, but because the honest answer is more complicated than yes or no. Here's what I know. Oliver didn't become the person he became overnight. Neither did I. We were both shaped by the same house, the same dinners, the same grandmother, and we came out completely different people. That used to confuse me. Now it doesn't. Because I think the difference was never about circumstances. It was about what we each decided to do with discomfort. He learned to move discomfort onto other people. I learned to sit with it until I understood it. That's not a moral judgment. It's just an observation. And it's the thing I keep coming back to when I think about what this whole experience actually taught me. There's a version of integrity that gets talked about like it's a feeling. Like you either have it or you don't. Like it's some internal compass you're born with. But I don't think that's right. I think integrity is a practice. It's what you do at 10 o'clock at night when no one is watching, and you could just let it go, and no one would blame you. Grandma June showed me that every single day of her life, not in big dramatic moments, but in the small ones. She returned the extra change when a cashier made a mistake. She kept records. She did what she said she was going to do. She built a reputation, one ordinary decision at a time. What Oliver didn't understand, what I think a lot of people don't understand, is that the kind of patience it takes to do something right is not passivity. It looks like doing nothing from the outside, but on the inside, it is the hardest possible kind of work. Every day I sat in that room, watching and documenting, was a day I had to choose not to react, not to tip my hand, not to let the anger push me into a move that would feel good in the moment and cost me everything later. That kind of restraint is not weakness. It is the whole game. And here's the part about cause and effect that nobody tells you clearly enough. People who cut corners, who forge documents, who rely on the assumption that no one is paying close enough attention, they don't get away with it because they're clever. They get away with it temporarily because most people give up before the truth finishes surfacing. The truth is slow. It requires someone willing to wait for it. I was willing to wait. I think about the paralegal who came forward on her own. I never asked her. She just saw something that wasn't right and couldn't leave it alone. That's the thing about building a case carefully and honestly. It gives other honest people something solid to stand next to. You can't manufacture that. You can only earn it by being the kind of person who deserves it. Grandma June left Oliver his share. That still gets me. She knew what he'd done, or suspected enough to write that letter, and she left him his share anyway. I used to think that was generosity. Now I think it was instruction. She was showing both of us, one last time, what fairness looks like when you have every reason to be otherwise. I'm still learning from her. I think I will be for a long time.